The foundation of Vladimir Putin's authority, once rooted in wealth, fear, and loyalty, is fracturing before the world's eyes. By late 2025, the balance of power that held Russia's elite together for over 2 decades is slipping away. What began as murmurs of discontent among Russia's richest men has now evolved into open defiance, fueled by a collapsing economy, rising sanctions, and a war that has drained the nation of both blood and treasure. Russian oligarchs, once the cornerstone of Putin's empire, are publicly lamenting their losses, their fear of losing fortune now greater than their fear of dying under mysterious accidents that have claimed nearly 40 prominent figures since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. According to Russia's central bank, nearly 1/3 of Russian companies reported record losses in the first half of 2025. More than 19,000 corporations declared total losses exceeding 5 trillion rubles, over $60 billion. For a country once flushed with petrochemical wealth, the numbers are catastrophic. But even more damning is what these figures represent: the erosion of confidence among Russia's economic elite. These oligarchs, whose yachts and London mansions once symbolized the Kremlin's soft power, are now witnessing their empires disintegrate under sanctions, global isolation, and mismanagement from Moscow. Independent Russian economists and international observers confirm that capital flight has surged to post-Soviet highs. A study by the Institute of International Finance estimates that over $250 billion in private assets have left Russia since 2022. That's more than the annual GDP of Finland, gone largely hidden in offshore havens or converted into cryptocurrency. The wealthy are not just hedging against economic collapse. They are fleeing a system that can no longer guarantee protection or prosperity. From a social perspective, this crisis exposes the brutal inequality at Russia's core. The oligarchs' panic contrasts sharply with the stoic suffering of the working poor, especially in regions like Buryatia, Dagestan, and Tuva, where young men are being conscripted at rates 5 to 7 times higher than those in Moscow or St. Petersburg. The Kremlin's war machine feeds on the periphery's ethnic minorities and impoverished families, those with no private jets to escape mobilization. As their sons die in Ukraine, oligarchs dine in Dubai or Istanbul, their loyalty evaporating as fast as their offshore accounts. The injustice is glaring and resentment is festering beneath Russia's polished propaganda facade. Meanwhile, Putin's promise of economic sovereignty has proven hollow. His pivot toward China and India has backfired. Beijing now dictates the price of Russian oil, buying it at discounts of up to 40%, while Chinese exporters quietly dominate Russian consumer markets. Russia's dependence on Chinese technology and credit mirrors what Western analysts call a reverse vassalization, a reversion of Russia from empire to resource colony. Even Kremlin insiders admit privately that sovereignty has become a euphemism for dependency. Politically, this widening fracture between elite and state is a sign of something deeper, the slow unraveling of the Putin system itself. For decades, the unwritten contract was simple loyalty in exchange for wealth. Now that wealth is vanishing, and with it, loyalty. Former oligarchs like Mikhail Friedman and Oleg Deripaska have subtly criticized the government's direction, calling it unsustainable. Even more astonishingly, members of Russia's Chamber of Commerce, traditionally docile, are warning publicly about a structural contraction that cannot be controlled. These aren't activists. They're the architects of the system, and their unease carries the weight of legitimacy. The demographic cost compounds the crisis. Russia's working-age population continues to shrink, with male mortality surging due to war and alcohol-related deaths. The Kremlin's attempts to offset losses through higher birth incentives and migrant labor are failing. The long-term demographic scar, what one demographer from the Higher School of Economics calls the silent collapse, is already visible: fewer young men, fewer skilled workers, and fewer reasons to hope. Even state television, once the iron wall of propaganda, shows cracks. In late September, a rare moment of candor aired when a guest economist admitted that stabilization is not achievable without systemic reform. The statement lasted 12 seconds before being cut mid-broadcast. Yet the message was clear: even within the fortress, reality is seeping through the walls. As winter approaches, the fear in Moscow is no longer of Western sanctions or drone strikes, it's of implosion from within. And the question now whispered among Russia's business elite is no longer if, but when. How long can Putin's inner circle remain loyal to a leader who can no longer protect their wealth, their safety, or their illusion of control? The silence of Russia's richest men has finally broken, and that alone marks a historic shift in the Kremlin's internal balance. For over 2 decades, oligarchs existed as the financial backbone of Putin's rule. They funded his projects, stabilized his budget, and maintained the illusion of prosperity. Now they are speaking publicly for the first time since the invasion of Ukraine, criticizing Moscow's mismanagement and warning that the Russian economy is spiraling into chaos. The catalyst came in early autumn 2025, when Alexander Shokin, head of Russia's Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, effectively the Oligarchs Union, declared that the country was entering an uncontrollable contraction. It was not a statement made in haste. According to Reuters and BBC analyses, the organization's members include key figures in energy, metals, and finance, those who once thrived under state contracts. Shokin's public remarks describing the economy's uncontrolled descent were a direct rebuke to Putin's claim that sanctions had failed. This rare defiance spread like wildfire through Russia's boardrooms and telegram channels. Business leaders from the steel, timber, and transport industries quietly echoed Shokin's words. Even more striking, some formerly loyal oligarchs are seeking legal residence in neutral countries like the UAE and Kazakhstan, transferring assets to avoid confiscation. "It's not about courage, it's survival," said a European diplomat, familiar with recent capital flight patterns. From a political perspective, this revolt represents the most dangerous kind of opposition for Putin disillusioned insiders with money networks and information. They do not need to form parties or protests. Their quiet withdrawal of support drains the system from within. Western intelligence assessments now describe a silent economic mutiny among elites, where compliance has turned to quiet sabotage. Some ministries report deliberate underperformance, with bureaucrats and executives alike slowing production, delaying payments, or leaking documents to foreign partners. But beyond political intrigue, this moment exposes the deep social fractures within Russia's hierarchy. Oligarchs complain of losing billions. Yet in the industrial cities that feed their empires, families can no longer afford bread. In Norilsk, steel workers are reportedly going months without pay, while factories in Sverdlovsk and Kemerovo have shortened work weeks to cut costs. According to independent outlet Novaya Gazeta Europe, poverty in these regions has tripled since 2022, while the Moscow elite continues to import luxury cars through gray market intermediaries in Armenia and Kyrgyzstan. The moral dissonance is staggering. For the first time, even state-run newspapers cautiously acknowledge that imbalances between regions are worsening. The divide between the capital and the periphery, between the rich and the conscripted, has become impossible to hide. In Dagestan, mothers gather weekly in small, defiant circles, holding portraits of their sons lost in Ukraine. Their protest is not political, but it carries immense moral pressure that even the Kremlin cannot easily suppress. As The Guardian reported in August, these women have become the unspoken conscience of the war. The oligarchs know this, and some are beginning to see their own vulnerability reflected in the rage of ordinary Russians. The fear of rebellion no longer comes from the liberal intelligentsia, but from the forgotten towns and villages of Russia's periphery, the very places supplying bodies for Putin's endless mobilization. They are starting to realize that the system eats its own, wrote DW commentator Mikhail Zygar. Meanwhile, the demographic decay accelerates the panic. Russia's population is aging rapidly, and the loss of hundreds of thousands of young men to war or emigration has crippled productivity. The Ministry of Labor quietly admitted in a leaked report that the country faces a shortfall of at least 2 million skilled workers across critical industries. Wages in construction and logistics have doubled in some areas, yet the exodus of IT and engineering talent, estimated by The Economist at more than 1 million since 2022, has left Russia technologically paralyzed. Even Putin's once loyal media moguls are whispering doubts. Behind closed doors, they question whether the regime can maintain control if the ruble continues its freefall. The currency's value, hovering near record lows at 150 to the dollar, has wiped out savings and driven inflation into double digits. The Kremlin's propaganda machine blames Western hybrid warfare, but ordinary Russians see the truth every time they enter a supermarket. And this is what terrifies the oligarchs most, a population pushed past its breaking point. They understand that revolutions in Russia rarely start in parliament. They start when bread runs out and salaries vanish. As winter approaches, the businessmen who once toasted Putin's invincibility now whisper about succession. Few dare to say it aloud, but among the elite, the question has changed from how to serve to how to survive. Could the men who built Putin's empire be the same ones to dismantle it? By autumn 2025, public frustration in Russia is no longer confined to kitchen whispers or encrypted chats. It's spilling into the streets. The collapse of local economies, the relentless inflation, and the unbearable loss of young men have created a combustible atmosphere that even the Kremlin's machinery of fear can barely contain. Across provincial cities, citizens who once kept their heads down are now beginning to speak up, not out of politics, but out of exhaustion. In the industrial city of Orsk, for example, a woman filmed herself standing amid the ruins of a drone-struck factory. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with rage. "Where is our security?" she demanded, describing children hiding in corridors and workers unsure where to run. Her video went viral across Russian Telegram channels before being swiftly removed by state censors. Yet for millions who saw it, her question echoed their own: how could the Kremlin spend billions on war while leaving its people defenseless and hungry? From a social perspective, this anger is rooted in injustice that has festered for years. The burden of war falls not on the cosmopolitan elite of Moscow or St. Petersburg, but on the ethnic and rural peripheries, Dagestan, Buryatia, Tuva, Bashkortostan, where mobilization rates are several times higher. A BBC investigation this summer revealed that in Buryatia alone, casualties per capita are 10 times those of Moscow. Entire villages have been hollowed out, their young men gone to the front lines or the grave. The mothers and widows left behind have become the moral backbone of resistance, their grief transforming into an unspoken collective defiance. The Soldiers' Mothers movement, once a quiet network of grieving families, has become a genuine threat to the Kremlin's narrative. These women are not activists in the Western sense. They are caregivers, teachers, and nurses, but their grief carries moral weight that no propaganda can silence. Their Telegram channels, operating under coded language to evade Roskomnadzor censors, now reach hundreds of thousands of followers. They share stories of unpaid compensation, unreturned bodies, and the lies told to conscripts' families. As The Guardian noted in July, their emotional authenticity has done more to expose the war's human toll than any Western media campaign ever could. From a political perspective, these movements represent cracks in Putin's once monolithic control. The state's response has been predictably repressive detentions, intimidation, and the labeling of groups as foreign agents. Yet unlike opposition, politicians, mothers are nearly untouchable. Arresting them risks public outrage that even the Kremlin's media cannot contain. Their very existence places moral pressure on a regime that depends on obedience and silence. And as repression grows, so does coordination. Regional protest networks have begun forming loose alliances. According to DW News, activists in the Urals, Siberia, and the North Caucasus are sharing information on strikes and demonstrations, often using religious or cultural events as cover. In Dagestan, weddings and funerals have become meeting grounds for whispered discussions about the next protest. In Yakutia, miners' unions, once fiercely loyal to Moscow, have begun issuing joint statements with teachers' groups, demanding bread, peace, and truth. From the demographic perspective, this unrest reflects deeper societal trauma. The war has robbed regions not only of sons, but of their future. In some districts of Dagestan, school enrollment has fallen by 30% since 2022. Young families are delaying childbirth or emigrating altogether, fearing that their children will one day be sent to fight. Experts from the Russian Academy of Sciences warn that the demographic vacuum of 2020-2035 will haunt Russia's stability. Every protest, every lost youth, every silent classroom represents a generational wound. Meanwhile, even loyal regional officials are losing faith. Governors, once content to echo Kremlin talking points, are quietly pushing back. Leaked recordings published by Medusa reveal that some are warning Moscow of uncontrollable tensions and social fatigue. Their pleas are ignored. The Kremlin's answer to every problem remains the same: more taxes, more censorship, more control. Yet control has its limits. When pensioners line up for food rations in Tambov, when miners strike in Kemerovo, when mothers in Vladikavkaz weep on camera, the illusion of national unity collapses. They cannot arrest hunger, one protester shouted during a rare demonstration in Tolyatti before police dragged him away. The regime's real danger is not an organized revolution, but a nationwide loss of fear. Once the population realizes that the state can no longer protect or provide, obedience becomes voluntary, and voluntary obedience can vanish overnight. As winter's cold sets in and energy shortages deepen, one question hovers like frost over the Kremlin's walls. Can repression alone sustain a government that has already lost the faith of its own people? As public frustration mounts, Putin's regime has chosen not reform, but repression. Yet in 2025, repression takes a new form: digital. The Kremlin's control no longer depends solely on police or prisons. It now extends into every phone, every post, every voice. What began as internet regulation has transformed into total information warfare, where truth itself is treated as treason. The government's latest decree, reported by Reuters and confirmed by DW, mandates that Russian bloggers with more than 10,000 followers must grant administrative access of their accounts to Roskomnadzor, the state's powerful communications watchdog, now supervised by the National Guard. Officially, the measure aims to combat misinformation. In reality, it grants the regime the ability to monitor, edit, or delete content at will. Popular journalists, YouTubers, and Telegram channel owners woke up to find their logins locked or co-managed by government overseers. From a political perspective, this move signals the Kremlin's deep paranoia. Social media has become the new battlefield for truth, where even apolitical bloggers can spark outrage by mentioning inflation casualties or drone strikes. The state is afraid of words now, one former media editor told The Guardian. They've lost control of the story, and when you lose the story, you lose power. The consequences have been immediate. Independent news outlets like Medusa, The Insider, and Novaya Gazeta Europe are now fully banned on Russian servers, their articles accessible only via VPN. Telegram, long considered the last free zone, is under assault too. State hackers are reportedly infiltrating major anti-war channels, posting fake statements or exposing user data. Dozens of admins have vanished, detained on vague charges of spreading extremist material. According to human rights group OVD Info, arrests for online discreditation of the army have surged by 400% since the start of the year. The revival of fear is palpable. Citizens speak in code even in private messages. Memes are considered subversive. In one widely shared case, a school teacher in Perm received a 9-year prison sentence for liking an anti-war post. Another man in Ulyanovsk was sentenced to 12 years for wearing a t-shirt that read "Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine." Meanwhile, a businessman convicted of selling toxic alcohol that killed 50 people received just 8 years. The contrast illustrates a terrifying truth in Putin's Russia. Words now weigh more heavily than lives. From a social perspective, this new wave of censorship widens the chasm between the urban and rural populations. In big cities, VPN use and digital literacy allow limited access to the outside world. But in small towns where state TV dominates, propaganda fills every screen. It's as if there are two Russia's notes, Al Jazeera, one connected and skeptical, the other isolated and afraid. That division sustains the Kremlin's power, turning ignorance into an instrument of control. Still, information finds cracks. Young Russians, digital natives in an analog dictatorship, are becoming masters of evasion. On encrypted channels, they share casualty lists, economic data, and foreign news. Some even re-upload banned documentaries with coded file names disguised as music albums. We call it the ghost internet, one activist told BBC News. It's invisible, but alive. But the repression is not only digital, it's institutional. Espionage and treason trials now fill Russia's courts. The Guardian reports nearly 2 convictions per day in 2025 with a 100% guilty rate. The Gulag has returned in all but name, repurposed as penal colonies for traitors. Political scientist Ekaterina Shulman describes it bluntly. This is the architecture of fear as governance. From a demographic perspective, this system devours its own future. The exodus of journalists, programmers, and academics since 2022 has left Russia intellectually hollow. More than 1.3 million people, many of them young and educated, have fled to Georgia, Armenia, Kazakhstan, and the EU. It's a brain hemorrhage, says a researcher from Carnegie Eurasia Center. The state is punishing the very generation that could rebuild it. Even loyal citizens feel trapped in a suffocating silence. The Soviet-era joke has returned. In Russia, you don't watch TV, the TV watches you. Only now it's not a joke. Through facial recognition systems, AI surveillance, and cyber tracking, the Kremlin's control extends beyond imagination. Every word becomes a risk. Every silence becomes complicity. And yet beneath this digital iron curtain, something stirs. Fear may control speech, but it cannot erase memory. Russians remember freer days, the laughter of the 2000s, the open web, the illusion of choice. That memory, suppressed but not extinguished, may one day ignite again. As the Kremlin tightens its grip on truth itself, a haunting question lingers in a country where speaking has become a crime. How long before silence itself becomes rebellion? By the end of 2025, Russia no longer resembles a modern power. It looks more like a besieged empire from another century, bleeding from within while pretending to stand tall. The war that was meant to restore national pride has become the symbol of its decay. Once feared as a geopolitical giant, Russia is now isolated diplomatically, economically, and demographically. Even its allies, China, Iran, and North Korea, view it less as a partner than as a pawn. In the corridors of Moscow, paranoia has replaced confidence. Western sanctions continue to bite hard, but it is internal collapse that truly terrifies the Kremlin. Oil revenues, once the lifeblood of Putin's empire, are drying up. Drone attacks by Ukraine have destroyed or damaged over a dozen refineries in the past year, according to Defense News. The result is a severe fuel shortage even within Russian borders, with entire regions rationing gasoline. The BBC reports that truck convoys are stalled for days in Siberia due to a lack of diesel strangling domestic trade. For an economy already weakened by overtaxation and capital flight, it's a death spiral. From a social perspective, Russia's people are paying for this imperial delusion. The disparity between Moscow's glittering elite and the struggling periphery has never been greater. In Dagestan, Buryatia, and Tuva, where conscription has torn families apart, entire villages now depend on state stipends that arrive late, or not at all. Meanwhile, oligarchs and politicians continue to hold lavish banquets in St. Petersburg, shielded from the hunger they've created. As Al Jazeera recently noted, the empire survives by consuming its poorest. The psychological toll is immense. Despair, alcoholism, and migration have surged, leaving behind a generation with little faith in the state or in the future. Politically, Putin's control is absolute but brittle. He has silenced dissent, imprisoned rivals, and monopolized information, yet even total control cannot mask reality. The economy contracts, soldiers return in body bags, and sanctions block every path forward. Intelligence reports from Reuters and The Guardian indicate growing anxiety among regional governors who warn privately that patience is ending in their provinces. Putin's answer has been predictable loyalty tests, firings, and purges. The president has replaced dozens of local leaders and generals this year alone, seeking scapegoats for problems he created. Each purge only deepens mistrust within the system. Still, the Kremlin's most dangerous enemy may not be NATO or Kyiv, it is time itself. From a demographic perspective, Russia faces a decline so steep that it threatens the foundation of the nation. The population has already fallen below 140 million for the first time in decades. The UN Population Division projects that Russia could lose another 10 million people by 2040, even without further war. Birth rates have plunged, while the loss of young men to combat and emigration has left entire sectors crippled. Factories, farms, and construction projects lack workers. Universities are half empty. The country is aging, shrinking, and suffocating under the weight of its own past. Even allies sense the weakness. China quietly buys Russian oil and gas at record discounts, dictating prices once controlled by Moscow. India limits its cooperation to transactional deals. The Central Asian republics Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan are drifting westward, signing energy and defense pacts with Europe and the US, rather than their former imperial master. Russia is not a center of gravity anymore, says a DW analyst. It's a satellite in slow decay. Meanwhile, Ukraine grows stronger. With expanded Western aid and new US policy under President Trump prioritizing peace through dominance, Kyiv's military has adapted into a high-tech force using AI-guided drones and Western surveillance systems. Each successful strike on a refinery base or bridge is more than a military blow, it's a psychological one. Every explosion in Belgorod or Kursk reminds Russians that the war they were promised would be quick and victorious has turned into an endless humiliation. Even within Russia's elite circles, whispers of succession swirl. Names of potential transitional figures circulate quietly among security officials, men who might preserve the system while replacing its figurehead. It's not about ideology, but survival. No one dares move first, yet everyone is preparing for what they call the post-Putin period. In private conversations leaked to Medusa, one oligarch described it bluntly. He's already lost. We're just waiting for the paperwork. This is the ultimate irony. The man who built his legacy on restoring Russian greatness has reduced it to dependency and fear. The war that was meant to unite has divided. The empire that sought respect now inspires pity. Even within its borders, Russia is fracturing socially, politically, demographically, each wound self-inflicted, each silence more deafening than the last. And as the Kremlin's lights burn late into the night, a haunting question lingers across a weary nation. When the empire finally collapses, will there be anything left to rebuild? Russia in 2025 stands on the edge of implosion. The oligarchs who once financed Putin's power are now defecting, the middle class is suffocating under inflation, and the poor are burying sons in a war they never chose. The Kremlin's tightening grip, digital censorship, mass trials, surveillance, has created not unity, but suffocation. The war in Ukraine, far from restoring pride, has shattered the illusion of stability and exposed the moral bankruptcy of a system built on fear and corruption. From a social perspective, the divide between elite and periphery is turning into quiet rebellion. Politically, the Kremlin's control grows harsher yet weaker, relying on repression rather than loyalty. Demographically, Russia's future is bleeding away, its youth dead or gone, its birth rate collapsing, its brainpower exiled. The global stage watches as Putin's empire contracts under its own weight, reduced to a client of China, and a cautionary tale for the modern world. And as silence spreads across its vast land, one truth remains unshakable: no empire built on lies can outlive the truth forever.